Okay, what's good, guys? This is a simple yapping video, and today I'm just gonna talk about one of my more personal opinions. And yeah, I'll get right into it. I just believe that in life you need moments to breathe. And what do I mean by that? So, after any type of work that you do, your brain needs mental space to process it. Your brain almost works like your body does, where after workout, for those of you who know, after your workout is actually the most key and critical time because that's when your body does the actual recovery. It's almost as important in the workout. It's like a viral Dragon Ball Z clip of Goku telling Gohan that same thing where he's saying where Gohan wants to train more, but Goku's like, hey, rest is just important. So I feel like your body and life kind of works the same way. And this was something that I picked up a lot when I was living in France, for sure. When I was over there, I just noticed a very different change of pace in life. You always stop to eat your meal, sit down. I never felt rushed. When I was in a restaurant, like I could simply get a cup of coffee and no one would bother me for hours if I didn't want to. And there just seemed to be a greater overall respect for the pace of life and for taking your time. And also, when I was over there, whenever we were traveling, there was a bigger emphasis, I feel like, on enjoying the moment. And honestly, I'll get into a lot of that in a different video, but I'll just say that that was during my experience over there is when I really just noticed it a lot. And as well, I recently got laid off of a job, and like I said, I'll make a full video in depth on this later. But basically, I was working a very high level, very corporate, very, Fortune 500, number one in our field division, where basically I was just trading my time and my mental capacity plus skills for money. And the reason that I'm getting into this story is where I basically had to be on call, not 24/7, but very similar to that. But I was making a good amount of money. Like, I was never worrying about my bills. I was always able to eat out. I was always able to basically afford whatever I needed to afford. But at the same time, I was exchanging that physical, you know, I guess, comfort for my own well being. And how does that tie back into giving yourself a moment to breathe? Where I noticed that during this job, I had no moments to breathe, no matter how much I tried. And even though I knew this concept, no matter how much I tried, I had no moments to breathe. And I was spending a majority of my time there. And as somebody who has placed so much of emphasis throughout their life, this was such a sharp contrast for me that now, since I'm no longer there anymore, I can really see how almost you lose yourself whenever you don't give your own brain and body that capacity to sit and recover. And ultimately, it isn't worth it. Trading your time and peace for money isn't worth it. Now, I understand people are in situations where they have to. That was a lot of situations with my coworkers. They were kind of, and I knew a lot of people who were in debt, who were trying to raise families, who just needed money. And so that was a fair trade off for them. But for me, being someone who was younger in my career and who had worked extensively hard to get there and was uberly talented, that wasn't worth the trade off for me. And also, another example from my own personal life, where again, I'm just kind of naming examples in my own personal life where this had impacted me. So recently, y'all, I moved out into my own place and I was living by myself really for the first time, where it was just me. And after getting fully moved in and settled in, emphasis on, you know, after getting fully moved in and settled in, because it was a lot of stress, paying bills, getting used to it. But after I was able to make my space my own, I felt more creatively free flowing. I felt super stifled when I was living with my parents after coming back home from school. And I'll do a whole video on that, moving out and what I learned. And a big reason I'm even hesitant to move back now, even though, like I said, I lost my job, is the mental freedom that I have from having my own space and being able to order my own life and being able to give myself that break that I feel that is important to have. And so this just goes all back into the concept of having moments to breathe and not worrying about if someone's gonna come knocking on your door. You have time to sit and write and think and read, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm recording this video late at night because I just had the opportunity to. I had the mental space to sit, write out my thoughts, and record them in a video for you guys. I got some friends even coming over later. Well, coming over in a couple minutes after I record this, but I got some friends coming over, and like I said, I'll get more into that and my importance of living on your own, or what I learned from living on your own. But just the fact that if I was living with my family or with my parents, I wouldn't have necessarily the mental freedom to do that. And that depends on your living situation, but I wouldn't have the mental freedom to do that. And if I were to do it, it would come with a lot of just mental stress, and I would have less ability kind of to flow, if that makes sense. Let me know if I'm losing you guys in the comments here. If this makes no sense, then just let me know. And so, some habits that I personally practice that help me a lot with being able to breathe. And you can see I got some Ghost of Tsushima in the background. I'm basically just a samurai, is what I'm trying to say, guys. I'm just a samurai. Some habits that really help me, though, are meditating a lot, journaling, taking walks, and I can go deeper into this. I'll say that for later videos, but some good real life examples of letting moments and events breathe, or after a conversation, or after emotional moments with a family or friends or a significant other. And I remember this quote from Dry Creek Wrangler School. You may have seen that if you're a guy in the self-improvement space, the dude with the cowboy hat who's always been game. But he was naming an example where sometimes you need to let the fire die out. You don't need to keep fanning the flame. And that was one of the best things I've learned, or one of the best things I've realized when it comes to dealing with people, is that you can break that feedback loop. So what that means is, for example, usually when you're in an argument, some people say, fuck you. They say, all right, fuck you. And I might get censored for that. But when you get mad at somebody, they get mad back at you. But one of the most disarming things, and one of the most countercultural things that works all the time, and I do this all the time, is whenever someone tries to up it with me and you just calmly respond, then it breaks the whole thing. It's like you're breaking the feedback loop because they have nothing to play off of. They were getting mad and now they want you to get mad. But if you say, if you can all have to back down, but you can respond without getting emotional. And that's what I'm trying to say. And even if you do get emotional, you let your emotions get the better of you. You don't need to then 5 minutes afterward be like, oh, I'm sorry, let's fix it. Like, sometimes you can let it breathe, let it go. And I'm not saying let it go forever, but just give it some time. And I feel like so much of our culture is hustle, hustle, go, go, go. One of my favorite other stories is an analogy of how there was a competition for cutting down who could cut the tree down the fastest. And it was a old guy versus a younger guy. And the younger guy was bragging to the older guy, saying, oh, I'm going to beat you. You're too old. I cut down 100 trees a day. You're never going to be able to beat me. You're too old and you're too weak, basically. And the old guy didn't say anything. So the competition starts. And the young guy starts going crazy, cutting down all his trees. And the old guy cuts down a couple trees. And then he stops and takes a nap. And then the young guy's like, oh, I'm going to wax this dude. So the competition goes on for a day. It's 24 hours. And then at the end of 24 hours, it turns out the older guy completely demolished, cut down 10 times as many trees as the younger dude. And the younger dude is like, how did he do that? What happened? He wasn't paying attention. And the older dude said, I sharpened my axe in between cutting. And then I had a sharper axe. And that's basically the whole point of this video, is that you can't wear yourself down to the bone in life and work and emotions and relationships. Sometimes you need to take a step back and just, strengthen yourself so you can come back stronger. The whole point isn't just to do it, just to never come back, but you come back stronger. And I practice so much in my own life. And honestly, it's a life-changing concept when you really think about it, is that you need to take time to actually, for yourself, not from a selfish way, but so you can come back. And even if you do need to help somebody, you'll be a better, stronger version of yourself. And I remember one time I was taking a trip. It was a college trip, and we went to this kind of conference during the day, and then we were gonna go out later that night. We were gonna go out to we were in New Orleans, so we were gonna go out. And one of the guys I was rooming with, he noticed that and this is kind of when I was like pretty heavy on just meditating and like being more spiritual. I just still meditate sometimes, not as much. Like during then, I was just like, I don't know, I was really, really in tune. And he noticed that I didn't go straight from the conference to changing down to the pregame, right? And like I'm saying, you can't go to the pregame. That's not what I'm saying. You can't go to the pregame. But I knew that I was just flustered from the whole trip, from the whole day, from the whole stress of the semester of the year. And I said, yo, I just need like 10 minutes to like, and I meditated. I did. I remember that. But no one knew. I didn't say I was going to meditate, but I was like, yo, just give me 10 minutes, right? And then he remember later in the trip, he just noticed that I was so calm, and he literally asked me. He was like, "Dude, how are you so calm? How are you so relaxed?" And trust me, I'm not always calm all the time, but sometimes I do my thing, right? And I told him, I literally told him, I was like, "Hey, dude, remember that time when you went straight down from the busy morning to getting everybody together to breakfast to lunch to the conference to pregame and to going out, and you never took a break?" And I'm just like, dude, I just took 10 minutes and I just like sat alone by myself for a second just to like chill and process and think about everything. And then I was breaking it down to him, and he was, he was listening to me, and I'm just like, it's just simple, small stuff like that. I'm not saying you have to go live in a cabin in the woods, but sometimes it's okay to take a break, and especially in the current culture and lifestyle that we live in. And again, I'll do a full kind of video on this topic, like our current culture and lifestyle, and finding simple ways to take a break. But I've noticed, in life you can't is a rhythm. In the Bible it says you bear your fruit in season, like a tree. Like a tree, if it really wants to make fruit in the winter, it can't because it's just not time. But in the summer it'll make, it'll have fruit. Like, and it's just it is what it is. And again, this is something that I really, really learned in this past episode with me getting laid off from my job. Because in that example, you can't really necessarily outwork your future or speed it up. And I was, in the self-improvement space for a long time. And I have a lot of love for that space. But one of the things that I think that it really, really gets wrong is this concept where you can't necessarily, work won't be able to change everything. Sometimes there are things that are out of your control. And I feel like this layoff for me is honestly a perfect example of that because, I was working at this, super high level, Fortune 500 company in a year-long training program, right? And I did nothing wrong. I was one of the best people. Like, in my opinion, I was the best. I was the best there. But I'll say one of the best just for, modesty's sake. But I was one of the best people there, and I got laid off at the end of the year because of, downsizing and budget cuts. And during that whole moment, during that whole year, I was working my ass off. I was thinking, okay, this is finally the moment. All my years of school and working have paid off. I'm gonna get this high-paying job. It's gonna change my life. But little did I know that no matter how hard I worked, if I did shit or if I did good or did bad, they just needed me for that year. And at the end of the year, I was going to be gonzo anyway. Like, there's nothing I could have done, guys. And again, you can say what you want down in the comments, but trust me, I was one of the best workers there. I was one of the hardest there. And I'll go into a full video on my experiences there, everything I learned. But trust me, there was nothing I could have done in that situation, right? But it just goes to show you where in that moment I could have been thinking, oh, self-improvement, self-improvement. I got to be the best in the room, best in the room. But in real life, it doesn't matter, guys. In real life, all it is what you can do and what you can't do. That's a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. And there's just something that I just couldn't do. And so, yeah, like I said, I'll go into a full video breaking down that topic. But, yeah. And another great example I love to pull from this is the book Think and Grow Rich, where he cites, I forget his name, I should have looked it up before this, but he cites a guy who came up with all these ideas from just staring or just, sitting at his desk in like a completely black room, and he would just sit there for like hours and just wait for, the idea to pop into his head. And they talked about it being infinite intelligence. I won't get into all that, but I will say that that is a great idea. Sometimes because you're receiving so much input in our lives, even, especially today, but even back in the day, imagine how much we're receiving from like reels and YouTube and Instagram and news and your friends and your family. And then when do you ever just give your brain, if your brain is like a computer, when do you ever just like sort through the files and like look for the actual key important stuff? Because there probably was a couple like important things that you got, but you just haven't taken the time to think about it. And so like that is just another example of, hey, let me just sit and think about it. But we don't do that. And I think that that's on purpose. I think that people that, the powers that be don't want people to be actively sitting and thinking. And trust me, I fall into this all the time. I need to remind myself so many times to sit and think. And recently I've been getting my screen time has been getting out of hand. Social media time is getting out of hand. So I definitely got to, get better with that. But, it's on purpose, man. I feel like they don't want us to be free thinkers to actually really sit and understand what's going on, because then we would be able to influence more in politics and all that stuff. But yeah. And again, I think this was a big occurrence back in the day. You probably see those videos titled on YouTube. Maybe that's just my feed, but it's where it's like, you need to be bored more. You need to like stop, using social media, which I think is true. I think we do need to be bored more. But I just think back in the day how people used to be bored all the time. And they would, that's when, ideas would come up with, when philosophers and artists would get their biggest ideas would come from the times they were bored. And think about it. Even now, today, when I come up with these video ideas, they usually just come at the most random times when I'm doing random stuff. And you probably notice that you come up with your biggest ideas when you're like going to take a shower or going to take a shit or doing something completely unrelated, just like sitting or taking a walk. And that's when your brain is actually, I feel like, in my opinion, that's when your subconscious is like starting to regurgitate the stuff that you were taking in back in the day. And so I know if you're watching this, you're probably around my age, like, younger, 2000 generation. So I know that we kind of got to see the best of both worlds, coming up with social media and all that. But I think it's definitely a great idea for everybody to just, relock in and sometimes let things breathe. You're getting so many videos in the algorithm. They push TikTok, YouTube shorts. I think it's just a great idea to sometimes just sit and let it, let it process for a sec. So that was all I had for you guys. A little bit of a think piece video, my 2 cents on it. And that's all I got for you guys today. So let me know down in the comments what you think, how you let yourself process information, if you do or you don't, or if your screen time's over 20 hours, if you're cracked or whatever. Just let me know down in the comments. But again, I appreciate y'all for tuning in, especially if you made it to the end. And I got much more content coming in the future for you guys. So love and peace.